My name is Emma Larson, a 27-year-old quantum physicist with nothing but a small lab and big dreams. When my breakthrough finally came, my father laughed across our family dinner table. "Your little experiment is worthless," he declared, sliding papers for me to sign away my rights. He never believed a daughter could achieve what brilliant men couldn't. What he didn't know was that my phone was silently buzzing with news that would change everything. Let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had someone underestimate your potential. Trust me, what happened next is worth sticking around for. I grew up in Asheville, a small town outside Charlotte, North Carolina, where autumn leaves turned our streets into gold every September. Our two-story colonial house stood on Oakwood Drive, just like my father's expectations stood firmly over my childhood dreams. James Larson, my father, built his construction business from scratch, turning a small contracting company into one of the largest commercial builders in North Carolina. He wore success like his tailored suits, precisely measured and always on display. "Business is predictable, Emma," he would say during our Sunday dinners. "You invest, you build, you sell. Science is for dreamers who never make real money." My mother, Margaret, once a promising accountant at a prestigious firm, had long ago surrendered her career ambitions to become the supportive wife my father expected. She managed our household with the same precision she once applied to corporate ledgers. Her silent complicity in my father's dismissal of my interests became its own kind of betrayal over the years. "Listen to your father, Emma," became her mantra, spoken so frequently that I sometimes wondered if she remembered having her own opinions. My fascination with quantum physics began when I was 10 years old. My fifth-grade teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, brought a prism to class and showed us how white light contained all the colors of the rainbow. While other kids saw pretty colors, I saw questions. What made light behave that way? How could something be both a particle and a wave? I checked out every book our small-town library had on physics, sitting cross-legged on my bedroom floor, surrounded by pages of equations I couldn't yet understand but somehow felt connected to. For my first science fair in 6th grade, I built a rudimentary double-slit experiment using cardboard, aluminum foil, a laser pointer, and my father's tape measure. While other kids made baking soda volcanoes, I was demonstrating light interference patterns. The judges to science teachers and our principal stood stunned as I explained concepts most high schoolers hadn't mastered. "Where did you learn all this?" asked Mr. Jenkins, the head judge. "Books," I answered simply. I won first place. My father skipped the ceremony for a business meeting. High school transformed from the social hierarchy most teenagers navigate into a series of stepping stones toward my growing obsession. While classmates went to football games and house parties, I volunteered at the university physics lab 20 miles away in Chapel Hill, taking 3 buses each Saturday morning to clean equipment in exchange for watching graduate students conduct experiments. Professor Susan Carter, the first female physicist I ever met, noticed my dedication. "You don't just want to watch, do you?" she asked one day after catching me studying a quantum entanglement experiment setup. She began letting me assist with data collection, treating me as a colleague rather than a high school volunteer. The divide between my family's expectations and my academic interests grew deeper with each passing year. When college acceptance letters arrived, Caltech offered a full scholarship based on my advanced physics projects. My father's response cut deep. 4 years wasted on theories that won't put food on the table," he said, pushing aside my acceptance letter to show me brochures for business schools. "Duke's Business School has a legacy program. My donation could get you in the door." "I want Caltech," I insisted. One of the few times I directly opposed him. "Then you're on your own," he replied. I left for Pasadena with 2 suitcases and a determination that hardened my resolve through 4 challenging years. I graduated summa cum laude, my parents attending the ceremony with tight smiles and minimal congratulations. My decision to pursue a PhD rather than join the real world, as my father put it, further strained our already tenuous relationship. My doctoral focus became quantum entanglement applications, specifically how entangled particles might revolutionize computing and secure communications. Most established professors dismissed my proposals as too theoretical, too ambitious, or simply unlikely to yield practical applications. "Quantum computing is 20 years away and always will be," one advisor told me, chuckling at his own overused joke. But I saw something others missed. Through meticulous experiments and mathematical modeling, I began developing a theory that quantum entanglement could be stabilized at room temperature under specific conditions, something the scientific community considered nearly impossible. If proven true, It would eliminate one of the biggest barriers to practical quantum technology. Just like at home, I grew accustomed to being underestimated. And just like at home, I used that underestimation as fuel. My research lab wasn't much to look at: a converted storage room in the physics building's basement with outdated equipment and flickering fluorescent lighting that hummed constantly. The university had assigned me the space almost as an afterthought when other doctoral candidates received the newer facilities upstairs. Yet, within those dingy walls, something extraordinary was taking shape. I'd covered one wall with whiteboards, my equations sprawling across them in what my few visitors called beautiful chaos. My desk overflowed with journals, printouts, and components for experimental apparatus that I often built myself from modified consumer electronics when grant money couldn't stretch to professional equipment. Professor Robert Alice, the only faculty member who didn't dismiss my theories outright, was a veteran physicist nearing retirement. He had the freedom that comes with an established career to support unconventional research. They laughed at Einstein, too, you know, he told me during one of our weekly meetings, his eyes twinkling behind thick glasses. Not that I'm comparing you to Einstein yet. His encouragement kept me going through failed experiments and rejected grant applications, while other doctoral candidates collaborated in groups. I worked mostly alone, refining my approach to quantum entanglement stabilization through hundreds of minor adjustments and late nights. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday at 2:15 a.m. I'd been running variations of the same experiment for 72 hours straight, sleeping on the lab couch in 3-hour increments. My modified apparatus BART quantum computer part superconducting circuit had been producing inconsistent results all week, but this time, something changed. The entangled photons maintained their quantum state for 8.4 seconds. Orders of magnitude longer than the previous record. I checked and rechecked the measurements, certain I'd made an error. When the third test confirmed the results, I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. Oh my God, I whispered to the empty lab. It's working. What I'd theorized was actually happening. The quantum bits were maintaining their entangled state at room temperature using my specialized containment field. If scaled, this technology could revolutionize everything from computing to secure communications to medical imaging. I called Professor Ellis at 4 a.m., not caring about the hour. "Emma, what's wrong?" he answered, groggy. "Nothing's wrong," I said, my voice shaking with excitement. "Everything's right. Can you come to the lab?" He arrived 45 minutes later in mismatched clothes, his white hair uncombed. I showed him the data, explained the experimental modifications, and ran the test again while he watched. When the results appeared on screen, confirming stability once more, he removed his glasses and wiped his eyes. "This is it," he said simply. "This changes everything." Over the next week, we repeated the experiment with variations, documenting every aspect methodically. The results held. What I'd discovered wasn't just an incremental improvement, it was a fundamental breakthrough that could make practical quantum technology a reality years ahead of predictions. Professor Ellis insisted we meet with the university's technology transfer office immediately. "You need to patent this before someone else figures it out," he urged. "This isn't just academic anymore. This has serious commercial potential." The meeting with the technology transfer director, Stephen Carter, was my first glimpse into how the world might respond to my discovery. He listened to our explanation, reviewed our preliminary data, and immediately called in 2 colleagues. "If this works at scale," he said after our presentation, "we're talking about revolutionary applications: medicine, national security, finance. Every industry that requires computing power or secure data would be interested." "How interested?" Professor Ellis asked pointedly. Carter exchanged glances with his colleagues. "Potentially billions if the patents are properly structured." The word billions seemed abstract. Theoretical, like the quantum states I'd been studying. I couldn't quite connect it to my work in that basement lab. "We need to move quickly," Carter continued. "I'll have our legal team draft provisional patent applications. In the meantime, absolute confidentiality is essential." As I left the meeting, clutching a folder of non-disclosure agreements and preliminary patent documents, a strange thought occurred to me. For the first time in my life, my father might actually be impressed by my impractical scientific pursuits. I called my mother that evening, something I rarely did, since our conversations usually centered on why I wasn't visiting more often or when I planned to settle down. "Mom," I said when she answered, "I've made a breakthrough with my research. It's really important. I'd like to come to dinner this Sunday and tell everyone about it." "That's nice, dear," she replied distantly. "Your father's been asking when you'll visit." I'll make your favorite lasagna. Double quotes. The drive to my parents' house that Sunday felt different. Instead of the usual dread, I felt a glimmer of hope that, finally, my family might see value in my work. I brought copies of the preliminary data and patent applications, nearly forgetting Professor Ellis's warnings about confidentiality in my eagerness to share my achievement. As I parked in their driveway, looking at the familiar colonial house where I'd grown up, I allowed myself to imagine my father's proud expression when he understood what I'd accomplished. Maybe this would be the bridge that finally connected us after years of disappointment and misunderstanding. Little did I know that the dinner ahead would shatter that hope more completely than I could have imagined. Sunday, dinners at my parents' house followed the same ritual since I was a child. 6 p.m. sharp. Formal dining room. My mother's good china set out perfectly. Even though we were just family, my father would sit at the head of the table, my mother to his right, always ready to refill his glass or fetch something from the kitchen before he even asked. I arrived 15 minutes early, the folder of research documents tucked under my arm. My brother Michael's car was already in the driveway. 1 year younger than me, Michael had followed our father's preferred path, getting a business degree and joining the family construction company. His willingness to fulfill our father's expectations had always cast my academic rebellion in starker contrast. Emma. My mother greeted me at the door with a quick hug. She smelled like rosemary and garlic. You look tired. Are you sleeping enough? Before I could answer, Michael appeared in the hallway. The prodigal scientist returns, he said with a smirk. We'd been close as children, but his loyalty to our father had created distance between us over the years. Good to see you, too, I replied, trying to keep my tone light. Today wasn't about old tensions. Today was about sharing my success. My father emerged from his study last, greeting me with a perfunctory kiss on the cheek. Emma, you've lost weight. Your mother will fix that tonight. We moved to the dining room, where my mother had outdone herself with lasagna, garlic bread, and an elaborate salad. As we settled into our seats, the familiar family dynamic reasserted itself immediately. My father dominated the conversation, talking about recent construction contracts and a potential expansion of the business into South Carolina. My mother nodded supportively, asking occasional questions designed to highlight his accomplishments. We just secured the Thompson account, my father announced, serving himself a second helping of lasagna. $15 million, project, biggest of the quarter. That's wonderful, dear, my mother said. Michael put together the final presentation, my father added proudly, showed real business instinct. Michael straightened in his chair, basking in the praise. Just applied what you taught me, Dad. I waited for a natural pause in the conversation, heart racing slightly. I actually have some news, too, I said, reaching for the folder beside my plate. I've made a breakthrough in my research. My father's expression didn't change. Oh, another paper published in some journal nobody reads. I pushed past the sting of his words. Actually, it's much bigger than that. I've developed a method to stabilize quantum entanglement at room temperature. The university is filing patents. 3 blank faces stared back at me. What does that mean in English? Michael asked. I took a deep breath. It means I've solved one of the biggest problems in quantum technology, computers thousands of times faster than current ones, unbreakable encryption, medical imaging that could detect diseases at the cellular level before symptoms appear. My father set down his fork. And this makes money how? Exactly. The technology transfer office thinks it could be worth billions, I said, the word still feeling strange in my mouth. Companies like IBM, Google, the Department of Defense, they're all investing heavily in quantum technology. My father laughed. It wasn't a warm laugh. Billions for your little experiment, Emma. Be realistic. I am being realistic, I insisted, pulling out the preliminary documents. Here's the patent application. The university is already fielding inquiries from tech companies. He glanced at the papers without really looking at them. Universities are always claiming some research will change the world. Then nothing happens. He passed the documents to my mother, who set them aside without reading them. Your little experiment is worthless, he declared flatly. If you want to make real money, you should have gone into business like your brother. The dismissal hit harder than I expected. Even with everything I'd accomplished, nothing had changed. I excused myself to use the bathroom, needing a moment alone to compose myself. As I walked down the hallway, I heard my father's voice from the dining room, unusually animated. Curious, I paused near the doorway. Michael, call Robert tomorrow, my father was saying quietly. Tell him we may have something interesting for quantum dynamics after all. You think her research is legitimate? Michael asked. Doesn't matter. My father replied. Robert has been looking to acquire intellectual property in quantum computing. If the university is filing patents, there must be something to it. We can position ourselves as early investors. My blood ran cold. Robert Mitchell was my father's college friend who now ran Quantum Dynamics, a tech company known for acquiring and sometimes burying competing technologies. My father was planning to sell my research without even telling me. I returned to the dining room, trying to mask my shock. As I sat down, my father reached beside his chair and pulled out a leather portfolio I hadn't noticed before. Actually, Emma, I had some paperwork drawn up, he said casually, extracting several documents. Since you mentioned your research last week on the phone, I thought this might be the perfect opportunity for the family business to diversify into technology. I hadn't mentioned my research on the phone. The realization hit me. He'd been planning this before I even arrived. Someone at the university must have told him about my breakthrough. These papers would establish Larson Family Holdings as the commercial entity representing your intellectual property, he continued, sliding the documents across the table. We'd handle all the negotiations, marketing, and business development. You could focus on your research without worrying about the commercial aspects. You want me to sign over my rights? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. It's a family partnership, he corrected smoothly. We'd manage the business side, which you have no experience with. Michael would serve as CEO of the new division. Michael had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable but said nothing. We're offering a 70-30 split, my father continued. 70% to Larson Holdings, 30% to you. Considering you'd have no responsibilities beyond technical consultation. That's generous. I stared at the contract in disbelief. Not only was he trying to take control of my work, but he was offering me less than a third of its value while making my brother, who knew nothing about quantum physics, the CEO. I need time to think about this, I said carefully. What's there to think about? My father pressed. You've never had any head for business, Emma. This way, the whole family benefits. My mother finally spoke up. Your father knows what's best, dear. He's just trying to help you. In that moment, I realized how deep the betrayal went. This wasn't just about my father's controlling nature. This was a coordinated effort to take advantage of my work while I was still vulnerable, before the full value was established. The three of them, my family, had discussed this plan without me. I'm not signing anything tonight, I said firmly, standing up. I need to consult with the university's legal team first. My father's expression hardened. Don't be difficult, Emma. This is a good deal. Most scientific research never makes a penny. Then you shouldn't be interested in worthless experiments, I replied, gathering my documents. I need to go. As I walked toward the door, my father called after me. Think carefully before you turn this down. I have connections at Caltech. One call about family financial interest in your research could complicate those patent applications. The threat hung in the air as I left. The perfect family dinner, shattered by naked greed and betrayal. The drive back to Pasadena was a blur. Tears threatened to spill over, but I forced them back, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. This wasn't the time for crying. This was the time for action. I called Professor Ellis from my car using the hands-free system, my voice shaking with urgency. They're trying to take it, I said when he answered. My father had papers drawn up to claim ownership rights. He's threatening to contact Caltech. Slow down, Emma, Professor Ellis replied, his calm voice a stark contrast to my panic. Who's trying to take what? My family, my research. My father prepared a contract giving his company 70% ownership. He mentioned someone named Robert from Quantum Dynamics. Professor Ellis went silent for a moment. Robert Mitchell, you mean? By reputation, Quantum Dynamics has been acquiring smaller research labs and patents for years. They're known for buying promising technology and either exploiting it exclusively or shelving it to protect their existing products. My stomach twisted. My father threatened to call Caltech about family financial interest in my research. Can he block the patent? Not legally, no. Your research was university funded, but he could certainly cause delays and complications. We need to move fast. His voice took on a determined edge I'd never heard before. Come to my house tonight. We'll call Stephen from Tech Transfer and get ahead of this. 2 hours later, I sat in Professor Ellis's cluttered living room with Stephen Carter on speakerphone, explaining the situation. This is concerning, Carter said after hearing the details. Not unprecedented, but concerning. Has your father made any direct claims of financial contribution to your research? No, I replied. There was none. I've been on university stipends and grants the entire time. Good. That helps. I heard papers shuffling on his end. We need to expedite the patent filing. I'll call our outside counsel tonight and have them prioritize your application. We should have everything submitted within 48 hours. That fast? I asked, surprised. When there's potential interference, we don't wait, Carter explained. Especially with something this valuable. I've already had preliminary inquiries from 3 major tech companies based just on rumor. After the call ended, Professor Ellis made us both tea. This happens more than you'd think, he said gently. When research shows commercial promise, all sorts of people come out of the woodwork claiming ownership, even family. I never thought they'd. My voice trailed off. Try to steal your work, he finished. People do surprising things when billions are at stake. The next morning, I received a call from the dean's office requesting an urgent meeting about my research. When I arrived, I found not only the dean but also the university's general counsel waiting. We received a concerning call this morning. The dean began without preamble. James Larson claims to have provided substantial financial and technical support for your quantum research. He's requesting the university acknowledge his company's interest before proceeding with any patent applications. That's absolutely false, I stated firmly. My father has never contributed a single dollar or minute to my research. He's a construction company owner with no scientific background whatsoever. The university counsel leaned forward. Do you have documentation of all funding sources for your work? Everything came through university channels, my stipend, lab space, equipment, grants. It's all in the financial records. They exchanged glances. Nevertheless, we need to investigate this claim before proceeding. It could create significant liability if ignored. This is just a delay tactic, I protested. My father is trying to force me to sign over rights while the patent is pending. We'll expedite our review, the counsel assured me, but these claims must be addressed. As I left the meeting, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Emma, it's Robert Mitchell. Your father spoke highly of your quantum work. I'd like to meet tomorrow to discuss acquisition. Very generous terms available for quick decision. The pieces fell into place. My father wasn't just trying to claim ownership. He was actively shopping my research to quantum dynamics, while simultaneously blocking the university's patent application. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. I spent the next 3 days barely sleeping, working with Professor Ellis and a small team of trusted lab assistants to compile comprehensive documentation of every aspect of my research. We gathered financial records, lab notes, equipment requisitions, anything that would prove the work was mine alone. Meanwhile, the university's legal team worked to address my father's claims, which grew more elaborate with each communication. He now insisted he had provided conceptual guidance and family resources throughout my education that contributed to the breakthrough. On day 4, I decided to confront him directly. I drove to his office unannounced, walking past his surprised secretary and pushing open his door without knocking. He looked up from his desk, momentarily startled. Emma, this is unexpected. Drop the claims against my research, I said without preamble. You know they're false. He leaned back in his chair, composure returning. They're not false. Our family supported your education for years. That investment gives us an interest in the results. Parental support doesn't grant ownership of my intellectual property, I countered. And you didn't even support my decision to study physics. You wanted me in business school. Remember? Precisely. If you'd listened to me, you'd understand business well enough to see this is a good deal. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit down. Let's discuss this reasonably. I remained standing. There's nothing to discuss. Withdraw your claims and stop talking to Robert Mitchell about my research. Something flickered across his face, surprised that I knew about Mitchell. You're being childish. This technology needs proper business development. What do you know about commercializing research? More than you know about quantum physics, I shot back. He stood suddenly, patience evaporating. You've always been stubborn, just like your mother before she learned her place. The comment stunned me. Her place in the family structure, he clarified, though his tone suggested something darker. Margaret had all these career ambitions when we married. She learned that supporting my business was more important than her own little accounting job. Is that what this is about? I asked, realization dawning. You can't stand that I succeeded in a field you don't understand or control. His expression hardened. I built this family's success while you played with equations in a basement lab. And now that your little hobby might be worth something, You think you can shut out the family that made it possible. My little hobby is revolutionary technology that I created through years of work. You belittled every step of the way," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "And now you want to claim it because you finally think it has value. You think you would have gotten anywhere without my name, opening doors, without the education I paid for. I was on scholarship. And who do you think donated to the science department building where your precious lab is housed?" he countered. "Larson Construction built half the new facilities at Caltech in the last decade." I stared at him, finally understanding. This isn't about business. This is about control. "You can't stand that I succeeded outside your sphere of influence." Something ugly flashed in his eyes. "You're a naive girl playing in a man's world, Emma. Do you really think those tech companies will take you seriously? They'll eat you alive without proper representation." By proper, you mean male. The pieces clicked into place. "That's why Michael would be CEO in your proposal. You never believed a daughter could achieve what men couldn't." He didn't deny it. "I'm being practical. Robert Mitchell deals with me as an equal. You'd be brushed aside in negotiations." I walked to the door, then turned back. "Watch me." That evening, my mother called, something she rarely did without my father's knowledge. "Emma," she began hesitantly, "your father is very upset." "I imagine he is," I replied coldly. "You need to understand," she continued, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "This business with quantum dynamics is very important to him. Mr. Mitchell has offered a board position if the acquisition goes through." My breath caught. "So, this isn't even about the family business. It's about Dad's personal advancement." "The family always benefits when your father succeeds," she said, automatically repeating what must have been his words. "And what about when I succeed, Mom? Does the family benefit then, too? Or only if Dad controls it?" She was silent for a long moment. "He's always wanted what's best for you." "No," I corrected her gently. "He's always wanted what's best for him. There's a difference." After we hung up, I received a text from Michael. "Dad's pulling out all stops on this. Said it's going to be Larson family versus you, if necessary. Is your research really worth destroying the family over?" I stared at the message, the final painful realization settling in my chest. In their eyes, I was the one destroying the family, not my father's greed, not their collective betrayal, but my unwillingness to surrender my life's work. That night, I made my decision. This wasn't just about patents or money anymore. This was about standing up to the painful truth that my family valued control more than they valued me or my achievements. The next morning, I threw myself into the patent race with a determination fueled by both pain and clarity. The next week became a blur of activity. Professor Ellis and I assembled a core team of 5 trusted colleagues, working around the clock to finalize the patent application while the university's legal team dealt with my father's increasingly aggressive claims. "We need to document everything," Professor Ellis instructed our small group. "Every experiment, every piece of equipment, every line of code. Emma's father is claiming conceptual contribution, so we need to prove every idea originated here." My small basement lab transformed into a command center. Whiteboards filled with timelines, documentation strategies, and technical specifications. We ordered takeout, slept on cots, and rarely left the building. Meanwhile, university sources informed me that Robert Mitchell had arranged meetings with 3 different departments at Caltech, ostensibly about philanthropic opportunities, but clearly fishing for information about my research. My father's construction connections gave him access to university administrators who might not otherwise have taken his calls. On day 3 of our documentation marathon, Stephen Carter arrived with troubling news. "Quantum Dynamics has filed a broad provisional patent application," he said, handing me a printout. "It doesn't specifically mention your stabilization technique, but it's written to potentially encompass it. They're trying to establish prior art." "Can they do that?" I asked, scanning the dense legal language. "It's a common tactic," Carter explained. "File something vague but related, then argue your specific innovation falls under their umbrella. It rarely works, but it can tie things up in legal challenges for years." Professor Ellis studied the document. "This is based on incomplete information. They know your research exists, but don't understand the mechanism. Which means we still have an advantage." "They're fishing for now," Carter cautioned. "But your father is scheduled to meet Mitchell and Caltech's development office tomorrow. If they gain more details about your approach, then we need to file before that meeting," I concluded. I said. Carter winced. "That's less than 24 hours. Patent applications typically take weeks to prepare properly." "We don't have weeks," I said firmly. "What's the minimum we need?" The next 21 hours became the most intense of my scientific career. Our small team split tasks. 2 colleagues organized experimental evidence. Another created technical diagrams, while Professor Ellis and I drafted the core technical description and claims. Carter arranged for 2 patent attorneys to join us remotely, reviewing sections as we completed them and suggesting critical revisions. We worked through the night, fueled by caffeine and determination. At 4 a.m., I hit a wall. The key mathematical proof underlying the stabilization method wasn't translating clearly into patent language. After my 5th attempt, I pushed away from the desk in frustration. I can't make this work, I admitted to Professor Ellis, who looked as exhausted as I felt. He studied my equations, then smiled slowly. You're approaching this like a journal publication. Patents are different. He grabbed a fresh piece of paper. Don't explain why it works. Focus on what it does and how to reproduce it. With his guidance, we restructured the core claims, focusing on the practical implementation rather than theoretical foundations. By 7 a.m., we had a complete draft. The patent attorneys recommended one final verification test before filing, demonstrating that the written description would allow someone to reproduce the invention. We quickly assembled the experimental apparatus according to our own instructions, identifying and fixing several critical omissions. 11:45 a.m., 15 minutes before my father's scheduled meeting with Mitchell and Caltech, Carter submitted our completed patent application electronically. The system generated a confirmation number and timestamp. 11:47 a.m. It's done, Carter announced, genuine relief in his voice. Your application is officially filed with complete technical disclosure. Even if they learn details now, they can't beat your priority date. We should have celebrated. But exhaustion had overtaken us all. I slumped in my chair, the emotional and physical toll of the past week catching up at once. Get some rest, Professor Ellis advised, squeezing my shoulder. The hard part is over. But it wasn't. The next morning, I received a text from my mother. Family dinner tonight. Your father has important papers for you to sign. Please don't make this difficult. Despite every rational argument against going, I found myself driving to my parents' house that evening. Perhaps some part of me still hoped for reconciliation, or at least acknowledgement of what I'd accomplished. The scene was eerily similar to our previous dinner. Same formal dining room, same china, same seating arrangement. My father seemed confident, even smug. My mother appeared anxious, while Michael watched me with a mixture of curiosity and concern. After a mostly silent meal, my father retrieved his leather portfolio once again. I've been in discussions with Quantum Dynamics, he announced. They're prepared to make a very generous offer for your research, contingent on resolving our family's ownership interest. He slid a new set of documents across the table. These papers establish a family trust to receive and manage the proceeds. All you need to do is sign. I glanced at the paperwork without touching it, and if I don't, then we proceed with our claim of conceptual and financial contribution, he replied smoothly. It could take years to resolve, during which your patent would be contested and effectively worthless. Why are you doing this? I asked quietly. You never cared about my research before. I'm protecting our family's interests, he said, as if it were obvious, including yours, whether you recognize it or not. As he pushed the pen toward me, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen and felt my heart skip a beat. It was an email from Stephen Carter with the subject line, "Patent approved, urgent news." I opened it quickly, scanning the contents as my father impatiently asked me to focus on the documents before us. The message was brief but clear. The patent examiner had given our application special priority due to its groundbreaking nature. Preliminary approval had been granted the fastest in the department's history. Most importantly, major tech companies were already bidding. Google starting at $1 billion for licensing rights. $1 billion for my worthless experiment. I looked up at my father, still holding his pen expectantly. For the first time in my life, I saw him not as the intimidating figure who had shaped my childhood fears, but simply as a man whose power over me existed only because I allowed it. I smiled slowly. About that signature. The shift in the room was immediate. My father's expression changed from confident to wary as I placed my phone on the table, screen facing up. What's that? He demanded. Patent approval, I replied calmly. Preliminary, but official, and the first bid for licensing rights. I paused, letting the moment stretch. $1 billion. His face went through a series of emotions, disbelief, shock, then calculation. He reached for my phone, but I pulled it back. That's impossible, he said. Patents take months. sometimes years. Not when they represent a fundamental breakthrough in quantum technology, I countered. The examiner expedited it personally. Michael leaned forward. $1 billion from who? Google, for starters, and they're just the first bidder. I turned to my father. Interesting timing, isn't it? Just as you're asking me to sign away my rights. My father recovered quickly. This only confirms what I've been saying about the value of proper business management. Without our family's resources behind you, I achieved this without your help. I interrupted, my voice steady. In fact, I succeeded despite your constant discouragement. You're being dramatic, he scoffed. I always supported your education. You supported what you could control. I corrected him. The moment I chose my own path, you withdrew that support. And now that my path has led to success, you want to claim ownership. My mother spoke up tentatively. Emma, your father is just trying to protect you. Business negotiations can be very complicated. Is that what he told you this is about? I asked her directly. Protection, not control or personal gain. She didn't answer, but her eyes flickered toward my father uncertainly. Did you know? I continued, addressing her. That dad has been promised a board position at Quantum Dynamics if this deal goes through. This isn't about family interest. It's about his ambition. My father's face hardened. That's enough. The fact remains that without proper representation, you'll be exploited by these tech companies. You need us. No, I said firmly. I don't. The university has already assembled a negotiation team of patent attorneys, technology transfer specialists, and business consultants. They have decades of experience licensing breakthrough technologies. Universities take advantage of naive researchers. He insisted. They'll claim the lion's share because it happened in their lab. Caltech's standard policy gives the inventor a third of all licensing revenues. I informed him. Far better than the 30% you offered for my own invention. My father changed tactics. We're still your family, Emma. Do you really want to create this division between us over money? The hypocrisy was breathtaking. This division wasn't my creation, I reminded him. You threatened my career, interfered with my patent application, and tried to sell my research without my consent. You created this situation. We can work through this. Michael interjected, seemingly uncomfortable with the confrontation. Dad, maybe we should reconsider the 72-30 split. My father shot him a warning look. But I laughed quietly. You still don't understand. This isn't a negotiation. I'm not signing anything. My patent is approved, and I alone control the rights to my technology. We'll contest it. My father threatened, his voice rising. Family contribution. Undue influence. There are a dozen legal grounds, all of which will fail. I interrupted. And in the process, you'll have to explain to your business associates why you're publicly attacking your daughter's achievement rather than celebrating it. That landed. My father's reputation in the business community was everything to him. The university has already prepared a press release about my breakthrough. I continued. Major science publications are running features next week. Your choice is simple. Support me publicly and be seen as the proud father of a scientific pioneer. Or fight me and be seen as trying to steal from your own daughter. The calculation was visible on his face. He was weighing options, looking for leverage, finding none. Think about your legacy. Dad, I said, softening my tone slightly. Do you want to be remembered for building or for taking? Over the next 2 weeks, a delicate dance unfolded. My father, realizing his position was untenable, publicly pivoted to the role of proud parent. I always knew Emma had extraordinary potential, he told a local business reporter, who called about my breakthrough. Behind the scenes, however, he made one final attempt at control. Through his attorney, he proposed a family reconciliation agreement that would give him an advisory role in the commercialization process and a small percentage of the proceeds in recognition of parental support. The university's legal team advised me to reject it completely. Meanwhile, interest in my quantum stabilization technology exploded. Beyond Google's initial bid, offers came from IBM, Microsoft, the Department of Defense, and 3 international technology The numbers grew from $1 billion to nearly $3 billion for exclusive licensing rights. Professor Ellis helped me navigate the sudden attention, shielding me from endless interview requests and meetings so I could continue refining the technology. Don't get distracted by the money, he advised. Focus on the science. That's where your true value lies. The university organized a formal presentation for potential licensees, where I would demonstrate the technology and answer technical questions. The day before this crucial meeting, I received an unexpected visitor at my lab. My brother Michael. Can we talk? He asked awkwardly, standing at the door. I gestured him in, curious about his purpose. I wanted to apologize, he said after a moment, looking around at the equipment with newfound respect. I didn't understand what you were doing here. You thought Dad was right about it being worthless. I finished for him. He nodded, embarrassed. I've been reading about quantum computing since all this happened, trying to understand. It's incredible what you've achieved. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched by his effort. Dad is, he started, then seemed to reconsider his words. Dad is struggling with this. Not the money he's impressed by that, but with being sidelined. Control has always been his currency. I know, I acknowledged, but I can't give him control over this, not after everything. I'm not asking you to, Michael assured me. Actually, I'm here to warn you. He's planning to attend your presentation tomorrow with Robert Mitchell. I overheard them. Dad's positioning himself as having inside influence with you. Mitchell's hoping that family pressure might give them an advantage in bidding. I was surprised by his candor. Why are you telling me this? Because it's wrong. What they tried to do to you was wrong. I was wrong for going along with it. He met my eyes directly. You deserve the credit for what you've created. His unexpected support brought tears to my eyes. That means a lot, Michael, really. So, he asked, what will you do now? Exactly what I planned, I replied with newfound determination, but I'll be prepared for them. The next day, the university's largest lecture hall was transformed for the presentation. Representatives from major tech companies filled the seats alongside venture capitalists, government officials, and select members of the scientific community. As predicted, my father and Robert Mitchell sat in the third row, whispering to each other as I approached the podium. I had prepared meticulously, explaining the technology in terms accessible to non-scientists while demonstrating its remarkable capabilities. When the quantum bits maintained their entangled state for a full minute, far longer than previously thought possible, audible gasps came from the audience. During the question period, Mitchell raised his hand. Ms. Larson, given the family resources that supported this research, how do you plan to acknowledge that contribution in your licensing arrangements? The room went silent. It was a calculated move meant to create doubt about my ownership. I smiled politely. Mr. Mitchell, all funding for this research is extensively documented in university records. Every dollar came from institutional grants and fellowships, which will be appropriately acknowledged. As for family contributions, I looked directly at my father. I'm grateful for the early education that sparked my interest in science, though my specific path in quantum physics was not the direction my family advocated for. My father's face reddened, but there was nothing he could say without appearing petty. After the presentation, Caltech's president announced the formation of a new quantum technology institute, with me as the founding research director. Dr. Larson's breakthrough represents not just a technological advancement but a paradigm shift in how we approach quantum applications, he declared. We are committed to developing this technology responsibly with appropriate access for researchers worldwide. As photographers captured the moment, my father approached me, extending his hand for the cameras. Congratulations, Emma, he said, his public face firmly in place. The family is very proud. I shook his hand, maintaining appearances. Thank you for coming, Dad. Later that week, the university finalized licensing agreements with a consortium of technology companies, structuring the deals to prevent monopolization while maximizing both financial return and scientific advancement. My share as the primary inventor would amount to over $300 million over the patent's lifetime. When the news became public, my mother called, sounding more animated than I'd heard her in years. Emma, this is extraordinary. I always knew you were special. Did you? I asked gently, because I needed to hear that years ago. There was a long pause. I should have supported you more, she admitted quietly. Standing up to your father isn't easy, I know, I acknowledged, thinking of my own journey to that point. He's not all bad, she continued, just set in his ways. Old-fashioned about certain things. Like daughters knowing their place, I suggested. Another pause. He grew up differently. His father was very strict about roles. That explains it, I said, but it doesn't excuse it. No, she agreed, surprising me. It doesn't. 2 days later, she visited my lab alone, something she had never done before. As she looked around at the equipment and equations, I saw her differently, not just as my father's shadow, but as a woman who had made her own compromises and choices. I had dreams, too. You know, she said suddenly, before I married your father, I was on track to become a partner at my accounting firm. What happened? I asked, though I could guess. Your father needed support building his business. It made sense at the time for me to step back. She touched a piece of lab equipment carefully. I don't regret raising you and Michael, but sometimes I wonder what might have been. For the first time, I saw the full picture of my mother's life, the talents subsumed, the ambitions redirected into supporting others. It didn't excuse her complicity in my father's behavior, but it helped me understand it. It's not too late, I told her, to do something for yourself. She smiled sadly. Perhaps not. As the technology moved into commercial development, I established clear boundaries with my family. My father's attempts to involve himself in business decisions were politely but firmly rebuffed. Over time, he seemed to accept the new reality, though I doubted he had truly changed. Michael, however, surprised me. He began taking night classes in technology management, genuinely interested in understanding the field. Not to interfere with your work, he assured me, just to be able to have real conversations about what you do. The final victory came 6 months later at the annual Southeast Business Leaders Gala. My father had been nominated for Entrepreneur of the Year, an award he had coveted for decades. I was invited to attend as a rising star in technology innovation. During the ceremony, the host announced a special recognition. This year, we're honored to present our first Breakthrough Technology Award to Dr. Emma Larson, whose quantum stabilization method has been called the most significant advance in computing this century. The audience rose in a standing ovation as I made my way to the stage. From the podium, I could see my father watching. His expression a complex mixture of pride and something else, perhaps regret, perhaps recognition. For the first time, I was being celebrated in his world, but entirely on my own terms. Thank you, I began my acceptance speech. Breakthroughs don't happen in isolation. They require support, resources, and belief. I paused, making a decision in that moment. I'd like to acknowledge my family, who taught me the most important lesson in science and in life, that conventional wisdom should always be questioned, and that the most valuable discoveries often come when you forge your own path. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a step toward something new, a relationship based on respect rather than control, on acknowledgement rather than ownership. As I left the stage, the weight of betrayal felt lighter, replaced by the confidence of having defined my own worth. 1 year after the patent approval, I stood in the gleaming lobby of Larson Quantum Technologies. My company, my name, the corporate headquarters in Raleigh housed state-of-the-art research facilities, development labs, and offices for over 100 employees. My original quantum stabilization method had expanded into a suite of technologies with applications ranging from secure communications to medical imaging. Building something from nothing taught me more about business than any lesson my father could have imparted. I learned to negotiate, to recognize value, to trust selectively, and to maintain control of my vision while delegating execution. Each challenge became a building block in my unexpected transformation from basement researcher to technology founder. The healing process with my family progressed in fits and starts. My relationship with Michael evolved most naturally. After completing his technology management courses, he approached me with a sincere request. I'd like to earn a position in your company, he said during lunch one day. Not as your brother, not through Dad's connections, just based on merit. I appreciated his humility. What position do you have in mind? I've been studying your business operations, he replied. Your supply chain management could be more efficient. I'd like to start there, prove my worth, and work my way up. His willingness to begin in a modest role rather than expecting an executive position spoke volumes about his personal growth. I agreed to let him interview with our operations director, with the clear understanding that he would receive no special treatment. Michael excelled, bringing his business background and newly acquired technical knowledge together in valuable ways. More importantly, he became a genuine ally, someone who understood both my scientific world and our complicated family dynamics. Dad asks about you, he mentioned one day, 6 months into his new role. He'd never admit it, but he follows every article about your company. Is he still angry? I asked. I think he's adjusting, Michael replied carefully. His generation measures success differently. He's starting to understand yours is real, just not on his terms. My mother's transformation proved more surprising. After our conversation in my lab, she enrolled in financial management courses at the local college, refreshing my skills. She explained when I asked about it, she began consulting for small businesses, gradually reclaiming the professional identity she had surrendered decades ago. Your father doesn't fully understand, she confided during one of our newly established monthly lunches, but he's not opposing it either. That's progress. Her small steps toward independence gave me hope that people could change. Even after years of established patterns, it made my own healing process feel less solitary. My father remained the most complicated relationship. For months after the patent approval, our interactions were strictly formal, limited to unavoidable family occasions. The man who had dominated my childhood now seemed uncertain how to approach me. His authority undermined, his worldview challenged. The first real shift came unexpectedly. I had been featured in Technology Review's Innovators Under 35 issue with a prominent cover story. A copy arrived at my office with a handwritten note. "Impressive work. Your determination reminds me of someone I know." Dad, it wasn't an apology, but from a man who had never admitted being wrong about anything. It represented a significant concession. I called him that evening. "I got your note," I said when he answered. "Good article," he replied gruffly, though they oversimplified the business implications. "That's what technology magazines do," I acknowledged, suppressing a smile at his predictable critique. A pause stretched between us. "Your company's quarterly report looked solid," he offered finally. "Good revenue growth." "Thanks. We're focusing on sustainable expansion rather than just rapid scaling." Another pause. Smart approach. We spoke for 15 minutes about business strategy. Neutral territory where we could connect without revisiting old wounds. It became a pattern. These careful conversations that acknowledged my success without directly addressing the betrayal that had come before. 6 months later, my father suffered a minor heart attack. At the hospital, seeing him vulnerable for the first time, something shifted in my perspective. His attempt to control my research, while inexcusable, came from a worldview formed over decades, one where fathers directed, daughters complied, and success had narrow definitions. "The doctor says I need to reduce stress," he told me from his hospital bed, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "Maybe delegate more at work," I suggested. He nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about succession planning. Michael has good instincts, but he seems happy at your company." "He is," I confirmed. "He's found his own path there." My father looked at me directly. "As you found yours." Despite my interference, it was the closest he'd come to acknowledging his actions. I accepted it for what it was, not the complete reckoning I might have wanted, but the beginning of one. As my company grew, I made decisions that reflected the lessons of that painful family betrayal. I established the Larson Foundation for Women in Quantum Science, providing scholarships and mentorship to young women pursuing careers in the field. Each recipient received not just financial support, but connections to a network of established scientists who believed in their potential. "What made you focus specifically on women in science?" a reporter asked during an interview about the foundation. "I experienced firsthand how even well-meaning people can underestimate women's capabilities in technical fields," I explained. "Sometimes the biggest barrier isn't ability, but having someone believe you belong in the room." The foundation became my way of providing what I had lacked: unconditional support for brilliant minds whose potential might otherwise be overlooked or undermined. When the first scholarship recipients began publishing significant research of their own, my sense of fulfillment rivaled anything I'd felt from my own scientific achievements. 2 years after the patent approval, at the opening ceremony for our new research campus, I invited my entire family to attend. As we stood together for photographs, still somewhat awkward but making the effort, I reflected on how thoroughly our family dynamic had transformed. My father, semi-retired and more subdued after his health scare, watched the proceedings with a complex expression that mixed pride with lingering regret. My mother, now running her own small financial consultancy, displayed a confidence I hadn't seen in my childhood. Michael had earned a promotion to operations director through his own merit, respected by colleagues who knew nothing of our family connection, and I had learned perhaps the most valuable lesson of all: that true ownership extends beyond patents and contracts to the courage of defining your own worth when others try to diminish it. Later that evening, at the private reception, following the ceremony, my father approached me with unusual hesitation. "I was wrong," he said simply, the words clearly difficult for him, "about your research, about what you could achieve." I studied his face, seeing for the first time not the intimidating figure of my childhood, but an aging man confronting the limits of his understanding. "Thank you for saying that," I replied quietly. "I wanted to control everything," he continued, surprising me with his candor. "Business, family, legacy, I thought I knew best." He glanced around at the research facility bearing my name. Clearly I didn't. "We all have blind spots," I offered. He nodded thoughtfully. "Your mother points out mine more frequently these days." That made me smile. Good for her. As I built my company and foundation over the following years, the pain of that family betrayal gradually transformed from an open wound to a defining experience that had ultimately made me stronger. I learned to set boundaries without burning bridges, to value loyalty without requiring perfection, and to recognize that even deep betrayals can sometimes lead to necessary reckonings. The quantum technology, that had nearly torn my family apart, eventually became the catalyst for a different kind of relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than authority, on earned trust rather than obligatory loyalty. We would never be the perfect family portrayed in holiday cards, but we had found a more authentic connection through confronting our worst moments together. On the 5th anniversary of the patent approval, I gave a keynote address at the International Quantum Computing Conference. Looking out at the audience filled with scientists, entrepreneurs, and students, I concluded with the personal wisdom I had gained along my unexpected journey. The most valuable discovery I've made isn't written in my patent. It's the understanding that your worth isn't determined by others' ability to recognize it. Breakthroughs happen when you trust your own measurements over external valuations. Sometimes the people closest to you will be the last to see your potential. Don't let their limitations define your possibilities. The standing ovation that followed felt like a final victory, not over my family, but over the self-doubt their betrayal had temporarily instilled. I had come full circle, from the young researcher desperate for validation to a leader secure in her own assessment of value. What experience in your life taught you to trust your own judgment over others' opinions? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of unexpected victories and hard-won wisdom. And remember, sometimes the most important signature isn't on a contract, it's the one you put on your own self-worth. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you always recognize the value of your unique contributions to the world.